I'm going to begin and ask you both just to give a 60-second synopsis of who you are and what you do, just in case any of our audience, our viewers, our friends, I prefer to call them because that's what they technically are on Facebook, any of our friends might not be familiar with what you do and who you are. So I'm going to begin with Lord Simon Woolley. So Lord Woolley, would you please just give us a quick synopsis, as I say, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, as to what it is you do currently?
Okay, well, I am the CEO of an organization called Operation Black Vote. We celebrate our 24th birthday on the 16th of July.
Wow, wow.
And so we may get a chance to talk about that in a while. You know,
Yeah.
in many ways, Mike, I see myself as a disciple of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yes, sir.
Dr. King had a dream, we all know, we all love his dream, but he also had a plan. And step one of that plan was to politically empower African Americans to be in a situation where they're no longer asking for justice and equality, but demanding it, using the democratic process. And so for the past near quarter of a century, as a disciple of King and X and other heroes and sheroes,
yes,
that my job has been to empower African, Asian, Caribbeans in the UK and beyond, really.
Yes.
Demanding. And of course, you know, our political empowerment, our voice is not just for us, it's for everyone. It's not a zero-sum game. It's a win-win for everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And do you want to add anything about your current position in the House of Lords and how that all works, just in case anybody's not particularly familiar?
No, yes. Well, I'm a parliamentarian. In October, I was ennobled as Lord Woolley of Woodford. This is where I live.
Yes.
I sit in the upper chamber scrutinizing laws. And you know, Mike, the funny thing is, ever since I joined in October, it's been more closed than open. First of all, Parliament was prorogued because of some shenanigans going on. Then there was an election. Now we're in COVID. You know, the average age of the House of Lords is 77. So I'm a youngster.
That's the average age.
That's the average age.
Good God, have mercy.
You know, I'm just a youngster in the House.
Yes.
But you know, and very few people of African descent sit in that House.
Of course, of course.
So I don't feel the weight. I feel empowered. I have my brothers watching over me, Brother David, and others.
Yes.
Feel their spirit every time I walk in that hallowed chamber.
Yes.
I'm speaking for them. I'm speaking for our community. So
fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lord Woolley. Good to see you've arrived, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Chief Superintendent Jeff Booth, we've got him on board with us tonight. I'm going to ask, we're just going around, I'm going to ask David next, just to spend 90 seconds just to familiarize our viewers and people who are joining. I prefer to call them friends who are watching, who are listening in, eavesdropping, and who are going to be posing some of the questions tonight, just to familiarize your current role, your positions in terms of who you are and what you do with them. So David, would you please go next, and then we'll ask Chief Superintendent Jeff to go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pastor Mike. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, and it's a pleasure to be here with Chief Superintendent Booth, and also with Lord Woolley. And just want to give a shout out. I think I always do it because I believe in honouring people publicly for the long-standing work that Lord Woolley's been involved in, the tireless work in connecting people across communities. People talk about me being a connector. I know that Lord Woolley's a connector, connected us into not just across the UK, but in the US. So I just want to publicly honor you like I do in private. Some people have to do it privately, but not publicly. I think it's honor's due where honor's due. So thank you for all the hard work that you do, the tireless work, the threats that you get, the insults that you get to try and make our community stand. So respect for that. My name is David Shasanya. For those of you that don't know, I'm a minister. I've got a long-standing ministry in London. I'm very much involved in connecting individuals across networks and inter-networks. But also, I think at the very heart of what I do is I try to be an encourager. I try to encourage people to relate, encourage people to collaborate, encourage people to consolidate and do stuff together so that we can be better off as a community. I do that informally, but I also do it formally through an organization that I run, a business called Paideia. And that business is involved in engaging with senior executives within various organizations helping them with various things like development around strategy, development around leadership, development around talent management, and so on. So I get the opportunity to go into a lot of organizations. Like I did spend a bit of time today with a CEO of a very well-known organization, just looking at how we're going to help them convert some of the messages that have come out of the Black Lives Matter campaign, and how to embed that in their organizational structure and make sure that it correlates with the systems and protocols that they have in place. So that's what I do for, if you want to say 9 to 5, and then I preach across different churches. I sometimes have the privilege to preach at the Tab. And also, Mike, thank you for all the work that you're doing and the ministry that you bring to London. So pleasure to be here.
Thank you, David. Grateful for your presence again. And of course, Chief Superintendent Jeff Booth is in the house. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us tonight. We are very aware that during these crazy times, which seem like a whole Netflix drama, from COVID right the way through to protests and everything else, we know that everybody's super busy. So I personally appreciate you sparing the time to come on board tonight for us to try and have a qualitative conversation, and for us really to be available, especially you guys, to be able to receive questions from people who might want clarity on some of the points that are in the headlines and are hitting our current affairs in this present time. But I'd ask you also just to give a quick introduction as to who you are, what role you currently play within the organization, and what else is happening in terms of your particular position. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. What they always say in terms of any kind of public speaking is always try to get ahead of either a politician or a pastor, because by the time they've finished, there's not much else to say. But yeah, my name's Jeff, and obviously I'm a chief superintendent, but just call me Jeff, please. I've been within policing for 29 years now. My current role, I'm based at New Scotland Yard. I lead on a department which is responsible for crime prevention, diversity, inclusion and engagement, but also community engagement, which I have responsibility for across London. Prior to that, I was the borough commander for Bromley, Croydon and Sutton. At the moment, my key focus is on the rising tensions, particularly within the Black community, as a result of what's happened in America with George Floyd. A lot of concerns around disproportionality in terms of the COVID legislation and how that's been enforced, legacy issues around stop and search. And the key issue that I'm hearing when I speak to community leaders is around that the Met are responsible for providing a policing service, but the Black community feel that they're on the receiving end of enforcement, and they want to be heard. They want to not only be listened to, but they want to be understood. So my role is to engage, to work with colleagues internally within the organization, to look at trying to influence our practice and our policies, and how we go about doing our business. So that's just a brief overview of some of the things that I'm responsible for.
Well, wonderful. Very grateful again for all three of you. And that's not platitude, that's sincerity, gratitude, sincere gratitude for you guys being here. And of course, tonight we've got the worlds then. We've got three primary worlds colliding, or hopefully connecting. We never know how the debate might get. It might be a collide. Three worlds. We've got the world of faith, of course, and church. And David really represents that well, especially as it relates to the Black majority churches, because his branches and his tentacles reach into the Afro-Caribbean and the West African, especially, context, and he unites them together by virtue of his connections. We've, of course, got Lord Woolley, who represents the political side of things. And, of course, we've got the other power structure, which is, of course, the policing side of things, here with Chief Superintendent Jeff Booth. I want to open. Here's where we want to get to, and I want to dedicate most of, or a lot of time tonight, to questions. So those of you who have questions, you've got access. I've used this platform to give you access to three amazing worlds here. When I say amazing, in terms of their ability to make change, or sometimes to, let's be real, there is oftentimes corruption and trouble in those worlds as well, including the faith world. That's not immune from trouble sometimes. But the fact is, if you've got any questions concerning any of the current affairs or anything's going on, please just pose your question by writing the word question in capital letters, then a colon, and then you can put your question. And my team, I've got a whole load of my team on board ready to receive your questions, and I'll try and throw as many of them as we can within reason to the panel, to my guests, my new friends here. So first of all, I want to open up though by talking, I think I'd begin with you, Lord Woolley, based on the fact that your current position, of course, in terms of working as part or as the chair of the Downing Street race disparity unit, your chair of the advisory group, and of course you have insights into many things that many people might not have insights into. The current context we're in, many people are finally, and when I say finally, I'm talking about non-black people, are getting an insight through the lens of sometimes black people, the current problems that are happening, the disparity that many people have been experiencing for their entire lives. But aside from some of the obvious things, what else has the unit uncovered and discovered that we might not be obviously privy to, that shows again and reinforces this issue of the truth of the disparity? Because there are still some people who don't believe there is any kind of disparity going on, and it would be good just to hear the chair to talk a little bit, just a little bit, and then I'll ask David and Jeff to interject and also ask them a couple of questions before we open up the floor. So if you'd like to articulate something there, that'd be great.
Yes, Mike. Well, actually, it's worthwhile looking at the backstory of how the Race Disparity Unit was formed, because quite a few years ago, we had a conversation with Theresa May when she was the Home Secretary.
Yes.
Dealing with policing, immigration, and et cetera, sharp end of policy. And we said to her that clearly it wasn't working and we needed an audit.
Right.
An audit where our communities are and how policies are working or not. She agreed in principle.
Yeah.
But then the idea got kicked into the long grass because her and David Cameron didn't get on. When she became Prime Minister, she said to me, the idea you had for the race disparity audit, an audit of the Home Office, we really liked it. And now we're going to do it right across Whitehall, every government department. And what we designed was a package that said, let's have a look at all the uncomfortable truths, the inequalities that our communities face in education, in health, in housing, right across the board.
So Theresa was real wide open to this. She was very supportive of it.
She was very supportive of it. I mean, you know, this is an idea from the black community to the Home Secretary, and now this is a world beater here in the UK, the Race Disparity Unit. We built this project with the mantra, explain these deep-seated inequalities, Mike, or change.
Right.
And my role was the troubleshooter, to go to the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, and say, look at these disparities that black people are facing. What are you doing about it? Oh, and by the way, I've got a few ideas myself. And so we have that now.
Yes.
And that we begun in closing some of these gaps. But, you know, COVID-19 and George Floyd, in effect, Mike, we had a perfect storm.
Yes.
On one side of that storm, you had this deadly disease. A minister said to me in the chamber that he thought it was a racist disease. I said to him, nothing could be further from the truth. But this disease has the uncanny ability of tracking deep-seated racial inequalities within our society.
Yes.
Health, education, criminal justice, employment. You know, many of those people, Mike, that died of COVID-19 were either on low pay or a 0-hour contract, which basically meant if they didn't put their lives in the danger zone, they couldn't pay the rent. They couldn't put food on the table. And so they were disproportionately exposed. Bus drivers, security workers, porters, cleaners, nurses, doctors. Many of them look like me and you.
Yeah.
And the care worker, Filipinos too. So this disease uncovered the racial disparities, shone a spotlight and amplified them. The other part of the storm very quickly was, of course, the death of George Floyd.
Yeah.
You know, he's not the first person that we've seen murdered in front of our eyes, but I think an accumulation of everything just shook. It's another pandemic.
Absolutely.
Just shook our systems, in which people said, enough. You know, it wasn't just the knee that killed George Floyd. It was the American system.
Right.
American system, an American system that in the extreme gave a tacit green light for officers to treat African Americans less than human.
Wow. And in terms of the audit itself, just give us a little insight into some of the nuggets that might not be as familiar to people who really may not even have been aware of the fact that people like you, who is obviously a black man, is heading the advisory board. And so that gives a little bit more credibility to people's belief that the unit are uncovering different things in terms of disparity. What are some of the things we should take note of that you've
once you have the facts at hand,
yeah,
then it's a starting point to change. And when we see education, we see many young black kids, black parents sending their kids to wanting their kids to go to university. So we're there in great numbers.
Yeah,
with great numbers, but the attainment gap for our communities is shocking.
Right.
We can go in with 5 A's and come out with a 2-2.
Yeah,
and the one person goes in with 5 A's and comes out with a first.
Right.
Experience is shocking.
Right.
Black graduates have to put 80% more applications in to get a job than their white counterparts. These deep-seated inequalities, these rigged system, lock some people in to the best universities, to the best jobs, and too often lock black people out.
Mm.
One of the things that always frustrates me, Mike, and maybe I'll ask your listeners, that as a disciple of Dr. Martin Luther King, I realized that power is never given, never has been, and never will be. So we have to organize, mobilize, and take it, and then demand justice.
Yes.
David and I have been on this trail for so many years, getting our communities registered to vote. People say, I'm not voting. There's no point in voting. We are powerful in the inner cities. We can decide who wins and who loses, because as you know, Mike, politics is a numbers game.
Yes.
And we have the numbers. But unless we're voting, no one's listening.
Thank you so much. Great information there. Jeff, I want to switch over to you. I want to stay on the same line of this disparity. I'm not sure if any of you have got your volume turned up on another tab or another device, because it's echoing a little bit. Thank you, Jeff. Grateful. Jeff, I'd like to come to you because obviously you're in a significant position within the Metropolitan Police there, and another disparity that hits the headlines all the time is the issue concerning stop and search. From your perspective, as not only an officer who's taken a vow, not only as a male, but also as a black male, talk to us about how you see the disparities, the figures, in terms of the fact that, of course, as the reports come out, that black people are, I think it's around maybe 8 or 9 times more likely to be stopped. And we've got the whole issue of racial profiling coming up. Talk to us a little bit about that, and also some of the struggles from a not just interracial, but an intra-racial perspective in terms of what you see going on within the community that doesn't help with policing consent.
Well, where do I start? I mean, within London, if you're black, you're 4 times more likely to be stopped and searched. We could debate stop and search for the whole of this interview, but there are a number of areas to it. Is it required? Yes, it is. Because we need to look at the wider picture. But if I deal with stop and search as it is, I think the key thing is it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Right. And it's the way that the stop and searches are being done predominantly on young black males, and it's the interactions that the officers are having with young black males. And we know very recently, black families with young kids to be there and everything else. The way that it's being done is what is causing the biggest concern. So I'll go back to when I was previously borough commander of Croydon. We were having knife crime happening on a daily basis. Yeah. We were having young black males dying in the streets. Yeah. And I'm actually going to the homes of the families who've lost a loved one. And they're saying to me, your job is to protect my son. What are you doing about it? At that point in time, they're not talking about color, they're talking about the fact that they've lost a loved one. So what we're saying is there is a need for stop and search. There is a need to prevent young black males from killing young black males. Let's not hide away from this fact. The reality is a lot of gang culture, a lot of the perpetrators are black males. Let's not hide away from that fact, because we are losing black people. We're killing ourselves. But at the same time, we need to be working with the community so that they actually feel that we are providing a service for them. The way that we're going about it at the moment needs to be improved dramatically, because what we've seen before is when we try to speak to the community and they show us videos where the officers they're not being civil, they're showing a complete lack of respect. Even before they're speaking to the person, they're putting cuffs on the person straight away. They've become conditioned. That needs to stop. And it needs a root and branch review about how we carry out and do our stuff. When we get it wrong, we should be brave enough to say we've got it wrong, rather than hiding behind legislation or hiding behind, oh, we can't speak about it because of it's an ongoing investigation. People will respect us more if we can turn around and say, on this occasion, we got it wrong. We're looking into it. We're speaking to the officers. We're giving training and all of the things that go with it. And as long as we get sidetracked by this issue, there is a concern that we miss an even more important issue about the fact that people are still dying in the streets. That for me is vitally important. They're not exclusive. We've got to deal with both issues, but we also need to have the community feeling that this is a service that they can rely upon and they can trust. And until we've got that, we're not going to get the community buy-in that want to work with us. So we have a responsibility as the police service to be able to show that we've heard what people are saying. We've got to demonstrate that we're looking to change, and we should be going out there and showing people that we want to hear and understand their perspective.
I want to follow on, just stick with you just for a moment. If you're enjoying this, I need everybody on board. Don't keep the knowledge to yourself. Spread the news that we're online right now. Share this particular live. Start a watch party. If you've been blessed already by what you've heard, information and the transparency, just send a few fire signals up, fire emojis up. Let everybody know you're enjoying this. But Jeff, I want to stick with you just for a moment, because you've identified what many people can see, at least ostensibly, is happening. The fact that there is often it's not an issue of the fact that people are being stopped and searched, it's an issue of how it's being undertaken. The question I want to ask you, because you're on the inside of the organization, you are a significant role, a super significant role in the organization, so you have a perspective as to why this is happening. Is it a lack of training? Is it wrong? Is it the way they're being trained is wrong? And also, or is it as is being supposed and being discussed in the communities? Is it that there's an still a genuinely problematic institutional problem? What's it like being black on the inside? And again, that also connects to something else I wanted to ask. I'm trying to give a lot of time to the people, but I wanted to ask about, recruitment. Would, as some people have suggested, recruiting more black and ethnic minority individuals into the force help with that issue? Is it an issue of connectivity, understanding the culture better by virtue of having people from the culture dealing with their own culture? I know I've articulated a lot there, but I hope you can capture it in the context that we're trying to reach here, because we're trying to find out, is there a problem on the inside? Is it the way they're being trained? What can you see as the real issue?
Okay, so a number of things, and I'll try and cover them. So the training is adequate. It could be improved. And what I mean by that is what you are doing within the classroom, given the legislation, is completely different to when you go out on the streets. And it's about understanding different cultural backgrounds. If you have not lived within a black community, if you're not used to interacting with different communities. And you go into there and you are already primed because of the culture of who you're working with. And someone is telling you, right, we are now going into a real rough area. This is what's going to happen. You are already in your mind preconditioned to expecting confrontation.
Yeah.
You then have a young black male, for example, who's probably been stopped 4 or 5 times and is pretty much sick of the interaction with a police officer.
Yeah.
So the moment you go, that police officer goes up to them, they may even start off being polite, but that young person is probably thinking, the last engagement I had didn't go too well. So you know what? I'm not even going to show any respect to this person because they don't show any respect to me. That causes a dynamic which just goes downhill.
Yeah.
If we include that within our training, when new recruits and you have young members of the community engaging with officers as part of their training, putting them in those positions, being able to pause, speak to the officer, speak to the young person, that for me is the type of training, on-the-job training, that is more effective. But what we also need to be doing is working with parents to be able to say, how are our young people engaging? It's a two-way relationship. We've got to improve the policing side. There is also a responsibility within the community as well. But as I keep saying, we, the police service, have got to be taking the first steps. We've got to be demonstrating that we are looking at doing things differently. In terms of recruitment, I think it's one of those things where you can stand on the outside and point, but unless you're actually inside the organization, that is how you bring about real change. But in order to bring people in, we've got to create an environment, a culture within the organization where they feel comfortable in being themselves. I have been in the organization for 29 years. I will not tell you some of the things that I have endured. However, because of my nature, because I'm stubborn as hell, the more people try and make stuff difficult for me, I will continue to put myself forward. However, why should young black males or young females be doing that? They should be embraced. And what I really want to see is, when I joined and I spoke to my dad that I was going to join the policing service, after he finished sucking his teeth, he said to me, if you're going to be in that organization, I don't want to be seeing you in 10 years still being a PC. I want you to get as high as you can to bring about change. So yes, we need to be recruiting, but I want to see more black males and females at the most senior levels, black commissioners, black assistant commissioners. We need to have them at the very top rather than just celebrating having numbers at PC levels. If we're going to bring about change, it's got to be real change.
Yeah, we're hearing something similar here, David, from previous lives where we've heard the same thing about not seeing representation in the leadership and influence roles, power roles of particular organizations. From a faith perspective, you were one of the founders of the Street Pastors. I know you've got lots of connections in terms of different faith, Christian faith organizations, denominations. You've also got branches and tentacles a little bit into the political arena. What can the church do, the black majority church? Because let's be real, for the black community, the black majority church is the largest, most influential, august body that can really make moves, I would argue, compared to America, who have the NAACP. They've got lots of other the black higher education facilities, which are mass organizations as well. But the black majority church seems to me, at least ostensibly, to be where a lot of the influence comes. What can we do to really help in terms of really, I guess, really bringing our people through into the political arena? Also, we're talking about the police recruitments. We're talking about also influencing many of our young black people who are on the roads, on the streets, as it were. Talk to us a little bit about your perspective with that.
Yeah, thank you. I think a couple of things. First, the theme that seems to unite all the Simon and all that Jeff says, in my mind, not summarizing what they're saying, is power. And I think that's what we need to really be focusing. And I think the church is an institution that has parity with institutions like parliament, institutions like the police. It's the only black-led, black-populated institution that has power. I was talking on speaking at a conference before I came on here, and I was saying one of the big challenges that the church faces, and I've had this discussion with Simon so often, is the challenge of literacy. Actually, there's one thing to be spiritually literate, to be able to run a church, to be able to do all the spiritual disciplines. It's another thing to move out of that sphere into a sphere of influence where you got to learn new literacies. There's a new language, there's new protocols, there's new methodologies, and often we're not willing to do that. Because often we assume leadership in the church, but then in assuming leadership within the church, it's withdrawn from within the community because we don't have the same level of literacy. So I think there's something about aligning intentionally, and this is what I try to do: align behind people like Simon Woolley, align behind people like Jeff. And I've been privileged to I'll be serving with Jeff and trying to bring some be a critical friend to the Met Police and offer some perspectives, challenging in a spirit of openness. Some of the things, you know, we heard today that it's not just that people get stopped, but it's how people get stopped. But between people getting stopped and how they get stopped, there's a number of people getting stopped. I always find what I call a logical inconsistency between intelligence-led policing and disproportionality. Because if you've got intelligence, that means you should know what's going on. So it should reduce the numbers because you should be more focused. Now, I'm not saying that's one person's fault, but these are some of the critical questions we can ask, not just as an individual, but representing an institution. And one of the things we don't have very much of in our community is our institutions. And what we need to be doing is casting a vision for people within the church to not only aspire to be the best preachers, to be the best praise and worship leaders, to be the best Sunday school teachers, but to be in partnership with people like Simon and people like Jeff, who can actually open up opportunities for the church's voice to be heard. And I've got a lot to say on this. I'll kind of hold back there, but I think we need to be looking at how we cast a vision beyond the four walls of the church. And also how we facilitate the inward investment of the experiences of people like Simon and Jeff into the church in order to help us to cast a vision. So one of the things I used to do is when I was pastoring a local church, and when I was looking after over 300 churches in London, I used to encourage them to have a community Sunday. Get your local borough commander in, get your local MP in, get the head of the council in, get the head of socials, get key players in the community and celebrate them. And I used to encourage churches, send a box of wine and cheese and biscuits to the local school at Christmas and say, thank you for serving our children. Build those relationships so that they can be a reciprocal investment, an investment out of the church with its skills, excuse me, but also an investment into the church with people bringing an insight that casts a vision for how the church can be better and do better between its four walls.
Love that. I'm gonna move straight to some questions here because I wanted to give a lot of time to the questions. So this one comes to you, Jeff, first of all, and then I've got one for Lord Woolley, and then one for David. To Jeff, the question's being asked: should recruitment really focus on recruiting from within the particular geographical context so that the officers being recruited are actually from that particular community? One of the things that you identified earlier, I guess this is connecting to, is the fact that sometimes you get people from outside of London, for instance, just as an example, coming into London and taking up positions or not understanding the culture, the context, the demographic, etc. How do you think about that being introduced as part of the recruitment policy? Do you think that would help?
Well, I definitely do think it would help. I'm proud to say that we are starting that particular process. We have a number of what we call outreach workers who are going out into the community, speaking to community leaders, trying to encourage young people. They're going into the universities, colleges. Now we have a new pathway into policing, which is like they call it like an apprenticeship, where you can actually get a degree
Yeah.
in policing at the same time of being a police officer. 3-year process, so you're getting paid.
Yeah.
They're paying you to study, and you are learning to become a police officer.
Yeah.
But the point that you're making is only by going into the relevant communities and recruiting from there, they will know, they will understand the context, and who better to be policing the communities, that people that actually live in those areas. We're also trying to do, we have a program which is called the London Curriculum,
Yeah.
which is where we are giving new recruits an understanding of the different cultures that exist within London, so that they've got a better understanding. So when they work either in Brixton, they understand the history of Brixton. They work in Hackney, Haringey, they get bespoke training which covers that geographical area and the history, so that an officer, if they are going and speaking to somebody, they will understand the context of that engagement, so they're not kind of working in isolation. So there's a lot of stuff that is going on, but one of the things that we are not doing as well as we could be and should be is advertising that and explaining that. We need to increase people's awareness of the things that we are currently doing.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Lord Woolley, question coming in, and I'm going to attach something that came in earlier as well concerning politics. There's a current discussion happening within the Black community concerning the Black pound and its power, when many people don't realize that what will bring real change is not just the pound, but legislation. And that's really brought in by our politicians. What would Lord Woolley say is more powerful, the Black pound or Black politics? Should we not be really focusing on political change as well as financial and economic control?
Two good questions. But first, I want to come back on policing, because it really is a hot potato.
Yeah.
You know, when I saw the stop and search of Bianca Williams and Ricardo de Santos, a beautiful Black family with a nice car.
Yeah.
And it seemed to everybody watching how that transpired. The police did not see a beautiful Black young family with a child. In their minds, they geared themselves up for an aggressive assault on this family. What haunted me is the image of the police officer with his baton like this to smash the window in front of Ricardo's face. And imagine, I don't know how many of us are parents. I'm a parent. Your child, your 3-month-old child, being taken away from you.
Yeah.
It is this mindset that doesn't see Black people as equals, that sees us as potential criminals, that is heartbreaking. Now, police need to police with consent. But when you lose that trust with this sledgehammer to crack a nut, if you're Black, you're a potential criminal, you lose the trust. And so the very essence in which would give you the knowledge about understanding your communities, Black families don't want criminals in the area. They want to get rid of them. That breaks down.
Right.
That trust breaks down. And I think the police really have to go back to school. I mean, I'm working with the police. I'm one of the directors of a process called Police Now, which recruits graduates to become police officers. So I can criticize, but I also need to nurture Black officers. But I think it's something fundamental, and it mirrors what happens, Mike, in the USA. Yeah. The way officers see Black people. I know it's an aside, but we need to confront it. In terms of the Black pound and legislation, it's not neither or. We need both. Right. You know, from the Black experience, our focus over decades has always been the public space. Getting people into power. And demanding from our government. But, you know, we overlooked a very, very simple fact. That you get your self-esteem, you look after your family by having a job. If you have the means to look after your family, things are a lot easier. Yes. Even in the public sector, 20% of the people from Black communities might be employed in the public sector, but in the private space, it's 80%. Right. So what I want to do, I want to nurture our people. I want to nurture in education so we can go to the best universities and get to the best jobs. But we also need to create entrepreneurs, inventors.
Yeah.
And I'm working with business leaders now to say we need an endowment fund for Black entrepreneurs so we can be wealth creators, wealth generators.
So in terms of pushing with the politics, though, that political stance, I mean, votes, how I mean, you've been doing the whole Operation Black Vote, you know, as you just mentioned, the organization, and I celebrate that. We genuinely honor you for pushing forward with that 24 year anniversary next week. And how about we all support it by giving some money to the organization? I've never done this before. I've actually never done this before, but I'm going to ask every one of our viewers, let's all go to, you've got on the website, have you got a giving page or something like that?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
let's all support it by giving even a pound. If a few hundred of us could give a pound, if a few hundred of us could give a tenner, could give maybe 24 pounds each to celebrate. I'm raising an offering for the organization.
Thank you, man.
Let's all support Operation Black Vote and try and have them push forward, because Simon's done an outstanding job over the years.
But you make a big point. You make a good point because of course, when you look at our organizations, we're threadbare, but we're fighting for our communities,
right,
on the coal face.
Yeah.
When you look at the states, you mentioned the NAACP. These are national institutions.
Yeah, they've got big funding. They've got big money over there, so they can do a lot more than we can.
Big money. And the thing is that unless you have that voice that holds the police to account, that holds business, that holds politics, that makes the demands, we need greater representation.
Yes.
In all areas at all levels, Mike.
Yes. Excellent. I know Jeff wanted to say something. You mentioned about Bianca Williams, and Jeff, you had your hand up to kind of interject there. Feel free to speak, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up from what Lord Wooley had said. And for me, one of the things that we need to do as an organization is recognize when we've got something wrong.
Yeah.
And my concern, and I've voiced this internally, is that when we start making comments that we as an organization have viewed the video and that the officers have not done any kind of misconduct, that shows how far we are from recognizing what the real issue is. It is about a family that has a 3-month-old child, and it's how we dealt with them. That for me is where the disconnect is. And now, even though the commissioner has made an apology today via the Home Affairs Select Committee, for the community, that's too late.
Too late. The thing is, Jeff, sorry to interrupt, brother. That could not happen to a white family. That would not happen to a young family driving a nice car with a 3-month-old child. That would not happen. And that is the fundamentals that we have to address. When you are driving whilst black and you are wrenched away from your 3-month-old child, that's not just we're sorry for this. That's a systemic problem within the police force that views us less than equal. I'm appalled. I am appalled. I am saddened to my heart that this family will have to tell their child, this is what happened to us for going about our law-abiding business from the very people who are supposed to be protecting us. Jeff, I know it's not you. You are transformative. You are transformative in that space. But our listeners, our black community are just weeping to see this day after day after day. 22,000, Mike, 22,000 people were stopped and searched in lockdown. When everybody was at home, black people were being stopped and searched.
So I'll just finish the point, and I support what Lord Wooley is saying.
Yes.
And what I would like to say, because I'm not going to get in defense mode.
Sure.
But what I would want the listeners to actually hear loud and clear.
Yes, please.
Is that when you have a small number of officers behaving that way, that tarnishes the whole organization.
Yes.
But what I will say, with all of the faults that the Met does have, there are still officers within that organization that do have the right values, that are trying to make a difference and are trying to police in the way that it needs to be. How we will bring about the change is by having these kind of discussions.
Yeah.
Is by me in my role, working with the likes of David, Lord Woolly, yourselves, having and putting pressure within our organization to bring about the change.
Yes.
Shine the spotlight to be saying, this is not right.
Yes.
The other concern for me is, and I know a number of people have said this, just imagine if Linford Christie wasn't involved. Just imagine if they weren't Olympic athletes. Would there have been that type of exposure?
Right.
We shouldn't be happening at all, regardless of who they are.
Yeah.
So I am fully supportive to the comments that are being made. But what I'm saying is we've got to be in it to make that change. And we've got to be continually making sure that the pressure is applied.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Jeff. We're grateful for that response. I think, the fact is there's a great book called The Black Image in the White Mind. And it's by, I believe it's Robert Recchi or something like that. And one of the things they articulate in there is that it's hard to get imagery changed once it's stamped into somebody's mind. And I know, Jeff, we were talking earlier about some of the mindsets of certain individuals, I guess, within the force, and how they still see black people as only able to achieve a certain thing. Just tell us a little bit about that story, because I don't want to try and articulate it incorrectly. You're the one who understands how things work in there, so just tell us a little bit about some of the mindsets, because we have some amazing police officers. I pastor some. I've got a few police officers in my church who are great human beings, great individuals, men of God, who really want to see change and get sickened when their uniform is let down by some of their colleagues. So, but tell us about some of the mindsets that are still kind of inside of the organizations that let you down.
Yeah, so very, very brief, because I know we're short on time. So it goes back to one of my favorite sayings: it's not what you do, it's how you do it. So during COVID, largely compliant, there was a view that this was an opportunity to reach out to those individuals that had been committing crime, to try and stop them from committing crime, deter them, and give them a different sense of direction, a life away from crime.
Yeah.
So the view was to identify a number of individuals that were known offenders and send them out a series of letters to say, look, this is your opportunity to move away from a life of crime. But within the main body of that letter, it was saying to them, and just to make sure that the target audience, it was 70% of the people they sent letters to were originally from the black community. Over 96% of them were black males. So they received these letters.
Letters from the police, basically.
Yeah, within the body of the letter, it stated, move away from a life of crime. You've got opportunities within music or sports.
Wow.
And when I saw the letter, I'm looking at the people and I'm saying to them, and they're looking at me, and I'm saying, can't you see what you are actually saying? Can't you see how your mindset is already preconditioned to a certain way of thinking? So this shows that even when someone is trying to do something, the way that they do it has unintended consequences. And that is where the scale of the problem, it goes back to the culture. And unless you have more people in the organization, more engagement from external partners to actually be highlighting things that for some reason they just cannot see, will continue to be doing stuff, and it will have those unintended consequences.
Wow. This is what we're saying. The black face in the black image in the white mind is either a sportsman or a musician, and that's as far as you're supposed to go. And these are some of the images we need to break. And to be quite frank, and I'm not saying this to sound suchy-muchy, as my American friends would say, but this panel alone is helping to, I guess, break that stereotype by virtue of what you all do and what you represent. Another question's come in, and I want to connect it to what you were saying, Lord Woolley, about entrepreneurialism, what you were saying, of course, Jeff, about when we talked about the ability to recruit. And David, I know that you've been a consultant to many business organizations as well through Paideia, etc. Somebody's asked the question, should we be looking for equality or equity? David, would you respond to that? Then I'm going to ask each of you to address the headline topic of tonight's discussion. If you notice, the title of tonight's discussion on the flyer, on the digital flyer that many people would have seen, is Color in Power and Politics. And it's not just dealing, it's a play on the words, not just color in as in the color in. It's about how do we color in power and politics? How do we color it in? How do we put more people of color in those positions? So David, I'd ask you to talk about the equity versus equality thing. And then I'm going to ask Jeff and Lord Woolley to talk about how do we put color in to power and politics. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, thanks. Let me just say a quick word about the question that came in, and I'll be very brief, the question that came in about the black pound of politics. And I think again, the church has a significant role to play, and even in incubating entrepreneurship. The church is the only institution or organization that I know that has 100% commitment and loyalty from its customers, but doesn't sell anything apart from the gospel.
Right.
And so all the money that comes into the church either goes towards running the church, which is reasonable, but doesn't actually go towards building an economic base that allows the church to exercise power outside of its four walls. So I think there's a real challenge for the church to build entrepreneurial models of business. Even if the church has got 200 members, it's got enough members to be able to keep the black pound circulating and to create employment. Now, the question of equity, I think we need equity, not equality. And I think it goes back to the first question that came out about the race disparity audit. There's what you find in organizations, and it's a conversation I had with a CEO today. I said to him, look, you want to have a conversation, but are you ready for the change? Because often the stats are the tick box to say that we've done it. We alleviate a sense of guilt. We alleviate a sense of responsibility, but we're not going to do anything about it. What we're actually calling for is real root and brass systemic change, structural change that comes down to individuals. Now, you talked just now about an individual who has a mindset that has been developed over time. If you're 30 years old, you have over 260,000 hours, in fact, 262,080 hours of unconscious conditioning. It doesn't take an 8-week, 6-week, 7-week course or even a 3-year course to actually deconstruct that mindset. It takes consistent, intentional interrogation, exposure to alternative narratives and alternative truths. And so what we're dealing with here is deeply entrenched and deeply rooted assumptions about, and I've said it before, assumptions about superiority, assumptions about incompetency, and assumptions about inadequacy. And unless we have in politics, policing, and even within the church itself, a consistent conversation about the challenges we face is going to be difficult. One last point is this: we need real consequences. It's all right to have a real conversation. It's all right to have visions and everything, but actually there needs to be consequences. And I listened to the apology from the commissioner today. It was what I will call a facilitated apology. I think it was Yvette Cooper who asked her, "Are you now apologizing?" And she made that apology. And we have that problem in the church. We have that problem in politics. Actually, we're back to power again. And we're back to that place where we just have to say, you know what? This is a deeply entrenched problem around how power is misappropriated, how power is abused, and how people are perceived to be powerless, are intimidated, and how they're commodified and transacted and are not respected. And the church can play a significant role in terms of changing some of those dynamics.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dave. Lord Woolley and Jeff, would you please talk about that color in? That color, how do we color it in? Politics, how do we color it in? The policing, because unless we see ourselves in those positions, going back to what David just talked about, the power of imagery, things often won't change.
Yeah, well, critical to it is David talked about that our roles that we assume. There's a wonderful book called The Racial Contract, and the racial contract is about white privilege, but our accepting of white privilege.
Yeah.
So we've been indoctrinated to think we're not good enough, that the system is what it is, and we've got to run faster, be bigger, all of that stuff. So much of that change is within us too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that when you have your congregation, Mike, that you see leaders, but do your congregation see leaders in themselves?
Yeah.
I know I'm always nurturing people to become MPs, councillors, governors, magistrates, and I have to say to them, be the leader you deserve to be.
Yeah.
And they're looking around, they're saying, are you talking to me? Yes, I am. Because I know the talent it oozes. So it is about self-reflection.
Yeah.
And then it's about a roadmap.
Yeah.
And then it's about making demands,
Yeah.
the political demands. We had a big project with The Guardian called The Colour of Power, actually. And we looked at the 1,034 top jobs in the UK, covering politics, media, insurance, those jobs that govern our lives.
Yeah.
Of those 1,034 places, less than 3% were black.
Yeah. Wow. Jeff, would you jump in?
For me, it's pretty simple. I think I've said before, in order for young people to aspire to something, they've got to see it. If you see it, then you believe you can be it. And I'm not just saying this, but I think role models like Lord Wooley are an example. But what we should be doing is it does touch upon the mindset. What we should be doing is celebrating our blackness. We should be proud of who we are. We should be working more collaboratively. We should be having more discussions like this, because just imagine if you're a young person and you are able to spend some time with Lord Wooley to understand how did he get to that position? To be able to have somebody to call upon that can mentor you. Someone like David, where people can go, but only by us investing in our own community can we start to get that change. But we've also got to be smarter. Operation Black Vote. So many times I used to get so frustrated being a borough commander when there were local elections going on, and I'm just, because I'm a police officer, I'm not involved in the political side, but then I'm hearing local black people complaining about their local councillors. So I then say, did you vote for anybody? No, what's the point? So if you're not going to help yourself, then wonder why we are in the position that we're in. We have to get up off the floor, and we've got to dust ourselves down and start working together. That for me is how we really get that change. But it starts with the mindset. It starts by having those conversations with each other. And the reality is, it ain't easy. The problem is with some people is they want the quick fix. They don't want to put the work in. And I can tell you, without even asking, I can imagine how many times Lord Wooley has had an idea and it's not been received. But you've got to be persistent, because more often than not, it's not the idea, it's sometimes the time. Sometimes people are just not ready to take that idea on board. But if you're consistent and if you're there, and if the idea is true, it will get there in the end.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I know we've already been over an hour. I'm going to close it down. We may have to do a part 2. If you're all up for a part 2, that would be fantastic, because there's more questions that have come in and the people really want to talk a little bit more. If you've been blessed by this, everybody who's watching, everybody who's listening, everybody who's posed a few questions, forgive us. Obviously, we have to give room for people to answer the questions exhaustively as well. So that eats into some of the time. But if you've enjoyed this already, just again light the page up with some fire emojis so that we know that you are being blessed by the information and the inspiration and the education that's being shared here. I'm going to ask each of you to give your closing remarks. Before I do that, though, I'd like you to also talk about any particular experiences that you've had in your careers that you've learned from. Somebody, a young person sent this question into me who I mentor. They've just texted me this question privately offline, that you've experienced, that you've overcome with some degree of wisdom to be able to aspire to your current positions. So if you could include that in your closing remark, that would be fantastic. Thank you. I'll go with David first, and then we'll work our way round to Lord Woolley and then to the Chief Superintendent Jeff.
Yeah, I think the big thing that I would say for tonight is reach out to people like Lord Woolley, reach out to people like Chief Superintendent Jeff. Reach out, build connections. Don't be afraid to be a small small fish in a big pond. Often there's a sense in which we want to be in control. Just go out, learn your skills, let people direct you in particular ways. Get to understand what is necessary, and just connect. I think that's the key thing for me. Connect and connect and connect. And then after connecting, we can then do some collaboration. And I think when we try to do collaboration without really connecting at a deep level where there's mutual respect, then it becomes a transaction, and transactions don't last. So really build the relationship and connect. I think the one thing that I've learned is it's a English saying, and it's they say keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer. So that's not in relation to the connection with people, but I've learned working in a very senior position in a white organization, being the only black person there, and working across organizations, that you better get to know your, and I use the word, if you want, in quotes or whatever, get to know your enemy, deconstruct their mindset, understand instinctively and intuitively who they are, read about them, study them, learn them, get to know how they think. And when I say outthink them, I don't mean try to be cleverer than them. Learn how they think to such an extent that their actions become almost like predictive text. The moment you hit the P, it just says people. And that takes discipline, it takes reading, particular reading. So that's the thing, connect and then really get to know the people that you need to overcome.
Yeah, I know we've had conversations as well before, David, about going back to your topic of imagery, about this is one of the key roles the black-led, specifically the black-led black church plays in trying to really wipe away that thought process that suggests that people cannot aspire to leadership positions. When you come Sunday in, Sunday out, and you see black leadership, it helps reinforce the potential that's inside of you, though you may be a person of color. And we've talked also about giving more space in churches, more platform for exposure of people like Jeff, people like Lord Woolley, to be able to interact with our communities. And so as the Tab Church, we are definitely committed to that. And I know there are other churches who are going to be trying to do that as well. Lord Woolley, your comments, sir.
Yes.
And also, please, when you talk, also, if you could talk about what we can do as a community to push forward with our political engagement as well. Go ahead.
Three key areas. The house that I reside in, the Westminster Estate, the House of Lords. My house, Mike, is your house.
Right.
My house is our house.
Yes.
And I want you to see me as a conduit. So I want to offer two things. One, I want a dinner with black church leaders. I have one demand in that I want male and female church leaders.
Yes.
So we can speak in our house.
Absolutely.
And the second, let's have a big meeting of your congregations in our house.
Right.
I want to blacken the Westminster text. You know, this is an institution. This is an institution that reveled in the enslavement of Africans, that reveled in the colonization of African countries, and set up Caribbean countries for the enslavement of our descendants.
Yeah.
we have to understand that history and change the text. Finally, I mean, I'm a bit like David about understanding your enemies. You know, we're of an age now, and we're fighters, we're warriors for social justice. That's why we're disciples of Dr. Martin Luther King. But you know, Mike, I would say to your listeners,
Yeah.
choose your battles carefully.
Yeah.
You can't fight them all. Now you've got to have that wonderful antennae to say yes, no, maybe. Those cul-de-sac arguments, leave them. They're going nowhere. They will drag you back. Use your experience to say, if I argue with this in this situation, there'll be a greater outcome.
Yeah.
We have to. We've earned the stripes. We've got to use that for the benefit of our community. Mike, when I was told that I was offered to come on your program, I said yes, and I did worry about the time, but I have to say I've enjoyed it. To be with my brothers, Jeff, you're doing a wonderful job, and I want to support you 100%. David, you're a brother, you're a friend, you are a disciple for fighting social and racial justice. And Mike, we've got to know each other. I'm going to see you in my house, our house.
Yes, sir.
And we'll talk politics and we'll talk race equality. And to your listeners, I hope that one day I get to see them.
Absolutely. Well, you've got an open invitation to the Tab. If no other church wants you, you're welcome to come. You're welcome to come on board. We're going to have you on our platform.
And don't forget to donate to www.operation.org.uk. I'm in church mode now. Don't leave the church until you donate.
Oh, hilarious.
God bless you.
Well, listen, Lord Willie, I'm going to be the first. As soon as we've shut this down, I'm going to go straight to the website, and I want to be the first to donate, because I think it's all very well and good us having conversation without any donation. And I think your donation is the most potent form of transformation. So I'm going to encourage all our church members anyway. If you're not, or if you're a friend of the Tab, our church membership, we got approximately 1,500 people in our membership. And if we could get 100 of those people to commit with me to just giving whatever you can towards Operation Black Vote to really push this thing forward, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much, Lord Woolley. And finally, to our new friend, Chief Superintendent Jeff Booth, thank you so much for being on board tonight. Would you give us your closing remarks as well as your experience?
Sure. So as we're friends, hopefully we'll get to the stage where you just call me Jeff rather than my title. The idea of a free meal at the house, I'm kind of like thinking what denomination I could come under. So
be a Tabite.
We'll feed you. You can come under any denomination. We'll feed you, Jeff. We'll feed you. Don't worry.
We're just building upon Lord Woolley's comments about the house being everyone's house.
Yeah.
I'd like to say, in all seriousness, the police service is a service for you all. We have got to ensure that the service that we provide is a service that you actually want. So I want people to continue to apply pressure, to be holding us to account, because only by doing that, and by others, we will be able to bring about the change. We are looking at engaging with church leaders. We're due to be having a meeting with senior church leaders on the 14th. It's going to be virtual, and one of the assistant commissioners is going to be there, but that's just the start. So one of the things that I'll be looking at doing is identifying how I can link in with David, Lord Woolley, and yourself, Mike, about how we continue to look at how we collaborate.
Yeah.
The final thing I'll say in terms of key comments for me in terms of advice, I would say to anybody listening out there, make mistakes. Only by making mistakes will you learn. You've got to keep doing stuff. One of the things that I learned in my career, and it was really, really, really uncomfortable. Quick story, very, very quickly. I was in charge of a demonstration with Greenpeace. St. Pancras International Station was just about to be opened, and I was in operational command. The world's media were there. I was there throughout the night, making sure that nobody was going to be doing any kind of demonstration. Early turn came in. They came in at 6 o'clock, and I'm just counting the time down. The guy that I'm supposed to be handing over, he's taking his time. And I'm standing there. And just as I'm about to walk off, I hear on my radio that Greenpeace are scaling down the side of the building. 10 seconds later, the chief constable is on the phone to me. And it's not one of those conversations you want to repeat. And I'm thinking to myself, there goes my career. I went over to the Greenpeace organizer. I said, listen, please, you're going to cost me my job. Is there anything that I can do that will persuade you guys to come down? The guy laughed. He said to me, listen, because you're so honest, we'll do our demonstration for 5 minutes, then we'll come down peacefully. True to his word, he came down after the 5 minutes.
Wow.
What I learned from that is sometimes you can prepare for everything, but there's sometimes things that are out of your control. But as long as you keep your humility and you keep the true sense of who you are, people will be drawn to you. Be true to yourself. That's all I can say.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Grateful to all three of you for joining us tonight. I know we ran a little overtime. Thank you, Lord Woolley, for your comments about the fact that you're glad it ran overtime. And to our viewers, if you've been blessed, if this has helped, if this has given inspiration and some education, once again, just light the page up with some fire emojis. If you want to see any more of our Wednesday night lives, you can head over to our YouTube channel, our church YouTube channel, which is called Tab London. And you can listen in on some of the other conversations that we've had. And we're hopefully going to have a part 2 of tonight, because I know there's a whole plethora more of questions that we've got that we need our panel to answer. So once again, thank you so much, David. Thank you, Lord Woolley. Thank you, Jeff. Have a great evening to you three gentlemen. And to all of you who eavesdropped tonight, and to those of you who asked questions, I hope tonight's been a blessing and of benefit to you. Remember, go over to Tab London and subscribe, actually, so you can catch our services on Sunday mornings as well. God bless you all. Have a great evening, and we look forward to a brighter future. Bless you.
Take care.